Our next subject under communication is how to make a presentation. And whether it's a presentation to a child, or a presentation to a business client, or a sales presentation, or whatever kind of presentation, we're all making presentations all day long, every day, business, social, personal, whatever. I have 4 parts to the presentation for you to consider. Here's the first one, identification. One of the most important parts of the presentation process is identification. Identification is, for a new person that you haven't met before, it's getting acquainted, it's breaking the ice. It's building a bridge between you and someone else, establishing contact, getting somebody's attention. So it's a very important part of the presentation process. Sometimes those first few seconds, sometimes that first minute is just so important to establishing rapport, establishing contact. Somebody once said, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. So sometimes how those opening seconds go is very important. But that's identification, getting acquainted. Some people find this easy, some people find it more difficult. What we're doing is, pointing it out so that you can start working on it deliberately instead of haphazardly, or instead of just letting it go, wondering why things aren't going well. We just pick it as a part of the presentation so you can go to work on it, identification. In identifying with someone, one of the best ways is to pick something you have in common to get the conversation started with. Somebody mentioned during the break they attended this leadership seminar up at the ranch. You were up there 3-4 years ago. And everybody got acquainted up there real easy. And the reason is because when you met somebody new, you would say, hi, how are you? Did you get as lost as I did trying to find this place? And everybody says, yeah, I got lost too. And that immediately starts this, little more friendly process of getting acquainted simply because you had a recent experience that you could talk about. So identification is trying to find something you have in common with someone else. You want something that makes you real, something that makes you a person that someone would desire to talk to. In the identification process, we use this little mental phrase. We want somebody to say, me too. Say, well, here's what happened to me. Somebody says, well, me too. I got lost. They say, well, me too. Here's how I felt. Someone says, I understand how that feels. Me too. Here's a reaction you don't want. The reaction called, so what? Now, usually one of the problems in people's trying to identify is they try to impress versus express. Mr. Schoaf gave me a little counsel on this. Don't try to impress, he said. Rather, learn to express. Express will get you more me toos. Impressing will get you more so whats. See, so what puts up the barrier instead of building a bridge. It blocks this flow of communication. Usually when we introduce somebody, the introduction's usually full of so whats. One of the biggest challenges I have in doing seminars is to overcome my introduction. Usually an introduction, you have to give your list of credits. But when somebody gets through with he's president of this and vice president of this, and he's got several companies, corporations, does business around the world, those are pretty well so whats. And I guess we consider it sort of standard, the so whats. So one of the first things I do when I come up on the platform, and I get the polite applause, and I understand it's polite applause. It's just part of the routine, right, that we go through. If you take that serious, you're in trouble, right? But you get the polite applause. So I walk up after all these credits, right? And I can tell that people are, saying, who is this guy? And is he really all he's cracked up to be, right? You can just feel all this going on in the audience. So I usually try to just, break that down just as quickly as I can by saying something like, I appreciate the warm welcome. Did you hear what the cow said to the farmer on a cold winter morning? Right? Thanks for the warm hand, right? And it goes over about like it did here, right? I mean, it just sort of, hangs out there. And that's to kind of let people know that, we're not interested in the chairman title or the president's title. We're here to just, talk person to person. And part of that is just an attempt to identify, to let everybody know you're not up there to talk down at them. You're not there to try to impress them with your success or anything else. We're there to really share ideas. But that's always a challenge. And every person and every audience is a brand new challenge. Every time you talk with somebody, it's a brand new challenge to identify. Now here's what you must do with someone who you already know. Re-identify. You don't get this identification process once when you get to know somebody and then it's forever over. You must constantly re-identify. No matter how long you've known somebody, they still want to know what are you feeling and what's going on with you and what are you thinking, and right? Everybody wants to know that, even if we've been around somebody for a long time. When you meet somebody, that's why we use those expressions. If we've known somebody for years, if we see them again, we say, how are you and how are you doing? That's to get this thing going, this identification process going between us and someone else. Now, in the identification process, make sure, if you tell little stories about yourself in identifying, make sure that they're accurate stories. Part of my identification I sprinkle throughout the whole evening seminar. My little story about meeting the little Girl Scout, selling me Girl Scout cookies, right? That's just a little story to try to keep identifying with my audience, to keep them on my side, right? That's identification story, right? She gives me this unique presentation, asked me if I want to buy, and I wanted to, but I didn't have $2. Now see, I can almost hear everybody out in the audience say, oh, I know what that's like. I've been caught without any money. I know how embarrassing that is. See, that's an identification story. Somebody says, I know how that feels. And I say, to this day I can remember the pain. Somebody says, I've had some of that pain too. I know what that's like. All of that is identification. So you have to re-identify. If you're talking with somebody over any length of time, you just re-identify little stories, things that's happened to you. So go back over your life and pick out the things that will identify with people. Now you've got the challenge of also identifying with a variety of people from different backgrounds and different businesses than your own. And you just learn to do that, different age groups. Part of it is just being more aware of what's going on in the world so that you can just intelligently talk about some things with people from almost any walk of life. Okay? Jesus, the master teacher, was probably one of the great identifiers of all time. He had this incredible knack of talking to somebody with language that they understood what he was saying. One day he said to those around him, today I'm going to teach you how to fish. Guess who he was talking to? A bunch of fishermen. He said, gentlemen, today we're going to have some lessons on how to fish. Only I don't want to teach you how to fish for fish, because you already know how to do that. What I want to do is to teach you how to fish for people. Now see, he couldn't have chosen a better identification. He didn't say, I'm going to teach you how to recruit. I mean, what do they know from recruiting? No. He said, I'm going to teach you how to fish. Now, when you're talking to fishermen, that's clever, right? You don't say recruit when you're talking to fishermen. You say fish. See, that's incredible. You just learn when you talk fishermen, talk a little fish talk. right? If you talk to lawyers, just talk a little lawyer talk. I mean, you just learn how, right? Go sit in the courtroom and, learn a little lawyer talk if you're going to talk to lawyers. Or get in trouble and go to court, right? And sit on the witness stand and whatever. Just so that you can learn to identify. See, I've been through it, I know it, and analyze who you're talking to and see if you can't pick out certain ways to identify. Now, of course, there's some stories that are common to us all. And sometimes it doesn't take much of a story to identify. Here's a good one. How to identify with kids. Let me give you some keys. First, read all their books. One of the best ways to identify with kids is read all their books. If you got a 12-year-old, you just read all their books so that you know them forwards and backwards. So you can use those books as a means of identification in stories. Say, remember that story, when? Kid says, did you read that book? Say, I read them all. I know all those stories. And remember when? And you can use 1,000 illustrations from those books that you've read to get a point across, to get something across. It's a means of identification. Read their books. Then when you get ready to talk, you got something in common. They've read the book, you've read the book. And it's loaded probably with illustrations and points and ideas and human life stories of disappointment and success and failure, all of that. The way to identify is find out what someone else is interested in, find out who they are, how old they are, what they do, what's going on, and see if in your reservoir of experience and awareness you can't find something that will identify and cause this person to say, me too, I understand that, and you've got them coming your way. Then also a way to identify with kids is to remember when you were a kid. See, I don't have any problem talking to 12-year-olds because I remember every day about being 12. I remember all those experiences in detail. The highs, the lows, the exciting times, the desperate times. When I thought the world was coming to an end, and when I was riding on top. I remember all those feelings at 12. Did you ever get chosen last? That ever happen to you? They're choosing up sides, right? So I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you, and you're standing there like this. See, all you got to do is go back over, search around in your life. You can find 1,000 ways to identify with all kinds of people from your own life experiences. Okay? You don't have to go anywhere else except to your own life to come up with all kinds of ways to identify with anybody. But here's what you got to do. You got to do it consciously. Consciously, deliberately. What can I pick? What can I think of that will help this conversation, that will get my idea across? Who am I talking to? Oh, yes. Here's what I'll use. Right? Your mind just, like a computer, starts picking up all these things. This is why it's so important to keep a journal. And when you think of a life experience and say, oh, I could use that life experience in a variety of ways. You put that life experience in your journal, you go over it, you think about it. Then when you get ready to talk, it's instant recall. You'll remember it. And you can't believe what you can do with people from all walks of life, business, social, personal. If you will learn the identification process, do it deliberately. Pick out things that you have in common, feelings you have in common with everybody. Okay? Identification. And then pick up stories from all kinds of life situations that are similar to yours. Somebody had a feeling of disappointment. You say, I know what that's like, but I'm going to use that story to illustrate disappointment. Just be aware. The movies you attend and the books you read and the stories you hear. Be a gatherer of life's experiences so that you can use them all for points of reference and points of identification. When a teenager watches the movie Gone with the Wind, they see one kind of movie. When you're in your 20s and 30s and you see Gone with the Wind, you see a different kind of movie, right? When you get along into your 40s, 50s, sure enough, it's a different kind of movie because now you're reading between the lines. Now you're sensing what the real tragedy was, what the complications of life were. It's altogether different at 40 than it is at 14. Same movie, only now you're seeing it. You're picking up all the different parts of the story and the feelings of the story. It's getting to you. But that's part of the identification process. Just be more aware of what you see and what you read and what's happening to you, so that you say, oh, there's something I could use, there's something I could use. I'll use that. The next time I talk to people like this, I'll tell them this, I'll tell them this, I'll use this story. That's part of the identification process, building this bridge.